Ubisoft has been struggling financially around this last couple of years or so, particularly this last year when a series of their games that have been released have been financial failures for the company. Now, they had a recent earnings call where they spoke with their investors, and during this earnings call, they tried to do the typical thing that many companies do at this time, where they try to basically say things aren't as bad or put a positive spin to bad news to their shareholders. But some people, like this article over here at that Park Place, basically asserts that it's possible that they are taking this a step too far and actually being outright financially deceptive to their shareholders, which, if that's the case, they're opening up another can of worms that they probably don't want to open up at this point. But let's look at this article right here and see what they actually are saying and why it could be financially deceptive for Ubisoft to be making these sort of claims. Ubisoft sparks fears of financial collapse and alleged investor deception as Assassin's Creed dev works hard to spin financial ruin as a positive. And like I said, this isn't unusual for companies to do during shareholder meetings or earnings calls like this to try to put a positive spin to it. So just keep that in mind. The Ubisoft Q3 fiscal year 25 earnings report confirms what many have feared. The company's financial troubles are only getting worse. However, there is a notable caveat. What is being conveyed to investors in the earnings call does not fully align with the grim reality presented in the actual report. In fact, the way Ubisoft is framing its situation to investors feels misleading at best and outright deceptive at worst. And I am kind of curious because I'm not the most knowledgeable person when it comes to a lot of these financial disclosures to shareholders. All I know is I've listened to a number of these earnings calls, and companies all the time try to put their positive spin to it. So I'm not sure at what point it crosses over into being deceptive to the shareholders, because I know that is illegal to do because companies do have to have a certain level of transparency even during these public earnings calls to their shareholders. So maybe this is a little bit normal. Maybe they are pushing the line here, but I think that's kind of what they're getting at in this article, is that they are, even if it isn't necessarily outright illegal what they're doing, they're pushing it as far as they can actually go before actually crossing over into being illegal, which a better world would be a company being, just kind of transparent about the fact that things haven't been going as good for them, but we don't live in a perfect world. The brutal reality, as outlined in the report, is that Ubisoft's net bookings have plummeted by 51.8% year over year in Q3, with net bookings for the first 9 months of fiscal year 25 falling 34.8% to just 944 million euros. Not only that, but they're talking about the concurrent player account fell 33.7%. That means people who are already playing their games, or there's going to be less revenue from people playing their games, like through microtransactions, DLC, and all this other stuff, ways that they can actually make money off people currently playing their games. So when you have less and less people actually playing the games that you have out currently, and the new games that you are putting out aren't actually selling enough with people, well, then that just goes to show the company. I wouldn't say they're dead in the water, because they do have some revenue coming in, because there are still some people out there playing their games. But right now, as a company, they're heading in the wrong direction. Beyond these sales decline, Ubisoft is also drowning in debt, with its total debt to EBITDA ratio sitting at a disastrous negative 21.1 times. And for people who don't know, EBITDA is earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, amortization, which basically means all the stuff that they have to pay out as a company, and all that other things like that. So if they're already in the hole before they have to start paying out that stuff, that means it'd be like a person who is using credit cards in order to pay down the interest rate on their debts. If you're in that situation, that's not really good sign. You need to have some more money coming in, or you need to cut your spending pretty quickly, because if you can't even afford the interest on your existing debts, well, then that means you're just pretty much heading for financial ruin, and unless something comes along to change things. So for context, a negative EBITDA means Ubisoft is losing money even before accounting for interest, taxes, and other expenses. a catastrophic indicator of financial health. The fact that this ratio has skyrocketed to this level suggests Ubisoft has little to no profitability and is taking on more debt than it can even hope to pay back. This aligns with the previous reports warning that the company is teetering on the edge of financial collapse. To make matters worse, Ubisoft's financial targets for fiscal year 25 is to merely break even rather than turn a profit. This shift in strategy signals a desperate attempt to stabilize the company rather than generate a growth, stark contrast to the bullish claims made in the past years. Instead of showing confidence in its ability to recover, Ubisoft appears to be simply trying to survive. So, just to simplify that, going back to my analogy about using your credit card to pay off your interest, they're basically saying it's even at that point where you not having to use a credit card to pay off your interest, but you still have your debts and other things like that. But you have enough money coming in that can handle everything. But at the same time, you're not actually having any left over when you're done. That's a better situation. But for a company the size of Ubisoft, basically living paycheck to paycheck, that's not a good financial state to be in. And that's something that, even though it's an improvement on where they're at right now, it's something shareholders aren't really that excited about, because why would you want to invest in a company that's actually not making money? Because if the whole point of an investment is you pay, let's say, $1 for a share. I mean, I know that's not the cost, but just bear with me here. You pay $1 for a share. Then as time goes on, it's worth $2. So then you make money off of that. You got a return on your investment. But if you pay $1 for your share and the company says, we're not going to be making any money, it's going to be like this for the foreseeable future, then as a investor, you're probably thinking like, well, then I'm not going to want to invest in a company if I have no expectations of actually increasing my investment, because at that rate, you really just have a risk. And if a company is going to say the best case scenario is we're breaking even, then more likely than not, you could be expecting to lose money on your investment, which is something that shareholders would probably want to cut from if that is actually the case. Given these circumstances, any rational investor looking at Ubisoft's trajectory would likely conclude that the company is a ticking time bomb on a plane already in full nosedive straight into the crater of an active volcano. I love the analogy for that here. So this is where it gets kind of bad for them. For some bizarre reason, Ubisoft conference call painted an overwhelmingly positive picture of what is in reality a disastrous Q3 sales report. Of course, investors' calls are known for their corporate jargon and strategic wording designed to cushion bad news, but Ubisoft's approach appears to teeter on the edge of legal misrepresentation. Some of the statements made blatantly contradict their own financial disclosures to the point where they may be considered misleading to investors. A prime example is how Ubisoft framed Assassin's Creed Shadows and Star Wars Outlaws. Yeah, because we all remember Star Wars Outlaws had that disastrous launch right here. Assassin's Creed Shadows, so far, a lot of the stuff that's coming out about that has been negative. Now, I will give them this. They released that footage to select streamers out there, and the reception to that from those people were fairly positive, but that does get addressed in this article. In the conference call, Ubisoft executives claimed that Shadow's early previews were received positively, stating early previews have been positive, praising its narrative and immersive experience, with both characters playing critical roles in the game storyline, as well as the quality and complementary of the gameplay provided by the dual protagonist approach. Of course, what they failed to mention during that is the early reception to it was from people that Ubisoft themselves personally curated. So they weren't just given the copy of the game or the early access copy of the game to anyone out there who was a streamer, or even prominent streamers. They were giving it to select people that they knew was going to give them a positive result, so that they can actually say, look, at people like our game, even though a lot of the promotional material in the lead up to this has been overwhelmingly negative by the vast majority of the gaming community out there. However, in reality, early previews were met with skepticism and controversy. So I kind of already mentioned that, so I'm not going to talk about it again. Similarly, they put an unjustly positive spin on the performance of Star Wars Outlaws, with CFO Frederick Duguest stating, while the sales curve for Star Wars Outlaws improved throughout the holiday season, in that they got a little bit more sales during the holiday season, but still not nearly enough to make the game profitable and not nearly what they were hoping for. It wasn't enough to deliver on our expectations, but the game will be a long-term seller. Now, by all accounts, it looks like it's pretty much dead at this point. This downplays a far harsher reality. Ubisoft internally projected Star Wars Outlaws to perform much better than it did. In earlier earnings calls, they acknowledged that pre-orders were far below expectations and its failure to meet internal targets was a significant factor in the company's declining revenue. Basically, they said it was going to be a lot better of a seller than it was, and as soon as it was released, that's when you started getting shareholders calling for the company to go private, and they wanted to get out because they were not happy with it. And then come to find out, no, the game was a disaster for them. It was really buggy, and a lot of people didn't like the design of it. Just various other elements that were wrong with the game that people hated with it, and as a result, it was a failure for them as a company, and they lost hundreds of millions of dollars, and no one is happy with this. I don't know why they're trying to put this positive spin. I think they should pretty much acknowledge at this point that the game isn't selling, and that's this just it, plain and simple. But no, they still try to insist that there is some positives to be had with it, even though the only positives is that they didn't sell less copies than they currently sold. I guess maybe since they sold some copies, I guess that is a positive. Clinging to shadows, Ubisoft's blind optimism in the face of collapse. Ubisoft is digging deeper into a pit of desperation, seemingly unaware of or willfully ignorant of the harsh financial reality it faces, whether through blatant misrepresentation or sheer self-inflicted blindness. The company's statements regarding sales revenue and debt paint a fantasy that no rational investor could possibly defend. At this point, investors following these developments must be wondering, is Ubisoft secretly preparing for a buyout or an asset sale while refusing to admit it? While the company vaguely acknowledged exploring strategic options, these framed it in the corporate jargon, with Ubisoft's board stating, the board is running a formal and competitive process to examine various transformational, strategic, and capitalistic approaches. So in other words, they're not saying one way or the other whether or not they're just looking to sell off their assets and take the company private, or just sell off the company entirely right now. So far, there has been some talk about them working with the Gamalt family, who's in charge of Ubisoft right now, working with Tencent, one of their minority shareholders, to basically take the company private and buy out the existing shareholders right now. Of course, if that happens, Tencent wants to have more control over the company, whereas the Gamalt family wants to maintain control. So right now, it looks like that's something that's up in the air, whether or not it'll actually happen. I think one of the better scenarios for Ubisoft, or at least for their IPs, is for them to basically sell them off to other companies who are more competent and will give them the love and care that they probably deserve right now. It's still doubtful whether or not, or it's not clear whether or not that'll actually happen. Right now, we are just waiting on the results of Assassin's Creed Shadows, because if that game turns out to be a monstrous hit that actually saves them as a company, well, then I think we'll see more of Ubisoft controlling all this. But if it is a financial failure, I don't really see what Ubisoft can actually do moving forward. They can't continue on with the way they currently are, so they would be forced to sell it. It's just a matter of who will be in charge of everything when it's all said and done. But let me know what you think about this in the comment section below. Do you think those statements were somewhat financially deceptive to the shareholders, or do you think that is just corporate jargon? And do you actually expect Assassin's Creed Shadows to help them in this matter, or do you think it's already DOA right now? And also, if you haven't already, make sure you click that subscribe button if you want to stay up to date with the latest entertainment news. And don't forget to click that like button and share this video out there, because it really helps out with the channel. Thank you.